At this time, I'd like to call the Budget and Purchasing Committee meeting to order. I'll ask Pat if she would to please do the roll call.
Lael. Here. Lewis. Here. Melton. Here. Mitchell.
Here.
Samples. Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Now, if you will, make emergency announcement, please, Pat.
In the event of an emergency evacuation, an alarm will sound. Everyone should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you've reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building. Please be mindful of others evacuating and emergency vehicles.
Okay, thank you. I'll now ask if there's any public input on items on the agenda. Okay, seeing none. D1A, review and possible approval of this resolution for the telephone service for the Blount County Animal Center. Teresa, would you like to speak on that, please?
Yes, thank you. There is one resolution in your packet. It's for telephone service for the animal shelter with Charter. It's an annual contract. That's who they have their service with currently. This just actually adds a feature and reduces the cost if we sign an annual contract. So turned out to be a good deal for us. They're getting what's called an auto attendant, which allows them to, when messages come in, when people call in, they're directed where they need to go, and they get information on the hours that they're open, and they can put that message the way they need it to.
I move we recommend the commission, and then I'll speak to it.
Okay. Have a motion. Do I have a second? Open for discussion.
Teresa's correct. The problem has been that the answering service that we've had, or the system we've had, filled up too easily with calls for the shelter plus animal control calls, and we get a lot of complaints that people just call and it says the mailbox is full. Mm-hmm. So this directs them one way or the other to animal control or the animal shelter or the director or whatever, and we're actually saving money in doing it, so I think it's a good move.
Any other discussion?
It said 12-month period. Is that June to June?
No, actually, they want to start right away.
Okay,
so it
so
will lapse. That's why we needed the resolution.
It start as soon as it's approved, and
and Mr.
the year
Garrett has
begins.
approved the contract, so
Okay.
we're ready to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote. Pat?
Lael. Yes. Lewis. Yes. Melton. Yes. Mitchell.
Yes.
Samples. Motion passed.
Okay, items D1B and D1C are for information only. We'll move on to the next item, which is the minutes. The minutes need approving. They are in your packet. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? And a second? Any discussion? Okay, I'll just do a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I'll declare the motion passed. Finance, increase in transfers. Next, we have the finance portion of the agenda. If approved, these items will go on to the commission for approval. F1A, Randy, would you like to address that?
Thank you, Mayor. This matter was submitted for your consideration, and I'm requesting that the item be pulled. The reason for that is we received the auditor's adjusting entries after we had prepared the agenda, and this is not necessary now per the auditors, so I would request that you pull it.
Okay. To approve? Okay, to have a second? To pull, yes. Any discussion? Okay, that's for a roll call vote.
Lael. Yes. Lewis. Yes. Melton. Yes. Mitchell.
Yes.
Samples. Motion passed.
F1B, General County Emergency Management, $102,467.23 is to reclassify budgets from 2008 to the president. I believe Bart is not here. Randy, are you familiar with that?
I'm going to give you the Cliff Note version. We have gone back and cleaned up all of our grants that EMA has dating back to 2008. We now have all the grants by their original grant awards. We also have accounted for all the expenditures since 2008 on every one of these grants. You have a summary sheet, a spreadsheet in there by grant telling you what balances are left on all those grants. And basically, if you approve what we have submitted to you, this becomes the balances and the budget for those grants that have remaining funds going forward. What we should have done every year at the end of the year is basically take the balances that remained on the grants as of the end of June 30's activities and resubmitted budgets to the commission for the commission to approve the balances on those grants. That had not been done with any consistency. This corrects everything and gets us on a level playing field going forward. You're not asked to appropriate any new money or anything like that. This just basically allows us to start effective immediately with the balances that remain on each of the grants.
Doesn't affect fund balance.
Well, the balances of the grants, in effect, are fund balances. If we were awarded a $75,000 grant and we've spent $35,000 as of the end of the fiscal year, $40,000 remains, or in effect, you have $40,000 worth of fund balance. It's a wash. But we should not have this problem going forward in the future. So every year at the end of June 30 activities, we would be bringing something like this to you that amends the budget going forward for what balances remain on those grants.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Do I have any discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Lael? Lewis? Melton? Mitchell?
Yes.
Samples? Motion passed.
Item F1C, General County Records, $5,000 state and national archival partnership grant. Jackie, would you like to speak on that?
I can answer questions if anybody's got any questions. It's the $5,000 is for designing the engineering fees to design an HVAC system for the newly allocated record storage space at the operations center.
Do you want to get it on the floor for discussion, or do you want to go ahead?
Motion to get it on the floor.
Okay, have a motion to have a second? Second. Okay, open it up for discussion.
Jackie, I know we've been on this thing for quite a long time, and you were to get some grants. Have you got those grants to do this out there, the work that needs to be done?
I've gotten the first step, and that's to design the HVAC system. That's the $5,000 one.
Yeah.
I have applied for another implementation grant through National Endowment of Humanities, and it could cover the cost to install the HVAC system.
Well, my question is there not a lot of work that has to be done out there to get this thing ready?
Well, the area needs to be cleaned out, and there'll be some old equipment probably to tear out of there, but there's only one wall that needs to be installed. There's two 10-foot garage doors that could probably be closed, well, depending on the recommendation of the architect, but I've looked at the cost to install the wall, and the supplies would probably run a little over $1,000, and the design of the HVAC system, I don't know. I've got a couple of quotes on the equipment only, but I don't have the final, total on that.
You have an estimate on the wall and closing those garage doors is $1,000?
Well, it's a little bit over $1,000 for the sheetrock and the metal studs and the fire-rated door. I talked with the building codes and checked, and it's got an existing sprinkler system in it. As long as I don't lower the ceiling, that sprinkler system should work. If we don't use it for office space, if we just use it for record storage.
I guess I don't what my problem is, I don't understand this situation of getting an engineering design for the heat and air system before we do anything else. Maybe that's done. I'm not up to it myself. But do you do that? That's my question. How do we know that what we're going to do out there? Is what I'm trying to say.
I've not committed any county money in the grants that I've written, only as cost sharing, which would be my salary or other employees' salary if we're able to get county employees to move me. So I've not asked for any other money at this time for the record storage part.
Okay.
Or any part of it, but this only would cover the storage of the records themselves in the record storage area.
Okay. Have you gone before the space allocation? Have they approved this
Yes.
already?
Yes, they have.
And I
I've-
can't remember. Did it come
I
through the commission
believe
too?
that I came through here. I came to the budget committee in August, and I believe that this grant was on the agenda at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Jackie, two things. One, how much of that information that we have has to be stored in paper form?
The permanent records are required to be stored. If they're permanent, then you can't destroy them.
But what if we stored them electronically?
I've got some handouts for you all on electronic format, and it goes into a little bit of what has to be done if you were to want to get rid of a permanent record, and this can explain it hopefully a little better than I can, if I could pass that out. Is that okay?
And once we get that, I'll tell you why I asked that question. And the reason I asked Jackie, I know that probably 80, maybe 85% of the information that we have, we could store electronically if we just had the means to do it. And
Where are you getting your
no,
percentage?
it's a question.
Oh, okay.
That's what I've understood. Even if it's 50%, it seems to me that instead of spending money to figure out a way to do what we've been doing, I'd rather figure out a way to spend that money on more current ways to store records so that we use less space.
I understand that, and hopefully some of the handouts can explain it. But according to Tennessee state law, they still recommend all of the permanent records to be either in paper format or backed up on microfilm before you could destroy the records. And one thing is with the electronic records is the migration of the material when the software or the type of equipment you are using becomes obsolete. You've got to have a set way to migrate those records into another format. And some of the handouts get into why it would be better or more cheaper to keep them in a paper format versus the electronic format.
Well, what I'd like to do, if it's okay with this committee, is take time to look at these documents that you've given us. I'm not for spending any additional money on an old way of doing business if we can find a better way electronically to do that, because I know that we've got to save all kinds. There's a way to save space. There's a way not to spend money on AC units. There's a way to do all that, and to do it, I think, electronically, so that we create space instead of taking up more space. So any grant monies, any funds that we choose to spend that don't address that, I've got a problem with.
Well, we looked at that with the IT committee in 2006. We discussed it, and at that time, we only took a portion of the records and sort of estimated what it would cost to do them electronically and then back them up on microfilm. And it was going to be more expensive than it would to, I think,
But that was 6 years ago.
yeah,
right?
it was. And today I contacted the assistant state archivist to make sure that none of the laws had changed. Have you all attended the records management class through CTAS? They probably have an online class that will get into that, discussion about whether it would be better. I guess each county could decide on its own, but the records committee, the county public records committee, has to vote on it also.
Well, I'd love to do that research and check with CTAS before we just go throw more money at a problem. I think there's a way to alleviate.
Well, that's up to this board, and I'd be glad to answer any questions specifically that you have.
Jackie, should we begin this transition to electronic record keeping and so forth, how long will it take, or could it be possible for us to get away totally from the paper records that exist now? Will that ever be possible? Or are there certain ones? Because the first couple of statements that I read on the cover page sort of indicated that there's some of those records that are not recommended to be done electronically for various reasons. So is it ever possible that we won't need space for paper type records?
I'll just tell you a little bit about what I've been doing since 2006. We are scanning records and we're indexing. Anytime you create a record digitally, you need the metadata and the index to go along with that record. If you don't have good indexing, then when you need that record, it's hard to find and you might not be able to pull it up. Another thing in electronic records that I've read about is they're easily changed, more easily than the paper document. And if you have a computer glitch, you might have those records backed up on the computer. And if your system went down, then you may or may not be able to retrieve it. And the state law still requires those records, if they're digital, to be backed up on microfilm and to be copied in duplicate. And you've got to keep one copy off-site. And then when you get into public access, your office needs to be able to retrieve the record in a timely manner. And, you may or may not be able to do that with the digitally created record. And one example that I could bring to mind is 200 boxes of court records that were transferred to me, and I was told that they wouldn't ever need to get in those again. They had them scanned and they were going to use the scanned image. Well, we get several calls a week for these records for us to go pull the original, because if these cases come up in court again, the lawyers and the judges, they want the original document. They don't want the digital copy. And there again, if you have an update to a case, you've got to go back and update that microfilm copy and your digital copy. Like if they add some kind of paperwork to that case. We have gotten into that. And we are scanning additional records that are going into those files that they originally had a vendor scan, and the vendor didn't do a very good job on indexing. And they had to go in and re-index those, and part of their office staff, I don't think, still know how to access them digitally.
Well, that depends a lot on the company, doesn't it?
Well, it could, but that's just one instance that
And I
I
think
know of.
there's also liability in there that if those aren't done correctly, that it's not the county's liability, it'd be the company's liability.
Well, public, the public depends on us as county officials and servants to keep evidential records of the public, like vital records, your marriage license, payroll records. If someone went to retire and TCRS has either not got documentation of the first years they've worked, then they will come back to us and they'll want us to pull those records too. And that person might be able to, draw more money when they go to retire. And it all comes down to, you need to have a very good plan in place. And I'm not sure even if you did that it would suffice.
Can you bring a list, Jackie, of those documents that have to be kept in paper form and
Well,
the documents that are available to be scanned?
This is the book that's put out by the CTAS. It's a records manual for county governments, and each department has the list of the retention schedule. This is available online on the CTAS website under e-library. You can either pull it up under each individual office, or you can go to the front, and it talks about the creation of the records committee and the reason for records keeping and, some of the laws that pertain to it. We also have to follow the Tennessee Code as far as records go, but we also follow federal, employment tax or laws concerning employment records. There's federal laws we've got to follow and state laws.
So are you telling me that all of the paper documents that we have, we're required to keep by law in paper form?
Well, if they're not backed up on microfilm, and then it goes through a process. It goes through the County Public Records Commission. They vote on it unanimously, and then they send it to the state. And the state archives has 90 days, I believe, to answer you back. There's something about 9 months in there. If they've not answered you in 9 months, then you can advertise in the paper that you're going to destroy those records. And then if nobody objects or no historical group wants to take possession of those records, then they can be destroyed, but only if they're backed up in duplicate on microfilm.
Which involves the process I'm talking about. So what I'm really interested in is, with the documents that we have, how much of those documents can we eliminate and create space by electronically backing those up? That's my question. And if we don't know the answer to that, then I'd like to take some time to go find out what that is before we go spending money on other methods of creating more space.
Well, when I've been planning for the grant, I would say there's probably 80% of the records that I've got at Hubbard are probably considered permanent records, or records that we would need to get into. Now, there are some records that have been microfilmed, but those microfilms may have been made in the 70s, and you would have to have time to go through, and proof everything and make sure that it was in the right format and that everything had been microfilmed the way it should be before, you would want to destroy it.
And that may be my point, is if we're going to spend grant money to do things, that's what I'd like to go spend it on, is ways to move forward electronically with this process, as opposed to, having to have bigger rooms to store things that we might not have to store that way to begin with.
Well,
And I know it's been 6-7 years, evidently, since we really took a hard look at it last. And that, from a technology standpoint, 6 years is an extremely long time. I can't help but think there are better ways to do this than the method that we're looking at.
well, I understand. And from my standpoint, I'm appointed as the records manager, and I'm doing the best I can with the funds that I'm given and the space I'm given. And when I've got offices that are on, they're on a waiting list because I'm out of room, I'm just trying to explore new ways of funding and ways to help the county do what I consider that we probably need to do.
Yeah, and I think all I'm saying is I think we're looking for a bigger truck when what we need to do is something different. But
You were talking about, right now, I agree we need to look at something else. And this record business has been going on for a long time. Overcrowding, we moved you out, we moved you from here, out there. I know you said you've got records everywhere, stored everywhere, and you're running out of money. But my whole thing is, I really don't understand the grant of $5,000 that we're spending for a consulting fee when we've got so much other things to do. You were talking about a wall. $1,000 wall. That's hard to believe, Jake. I'm not disputing you.
That
But how big is that wall?
It's 9 foot by probably about 14 to 16 feet.
Okay, then
tall.
you said you've got the closed-in 2 garage doors. Is that right?
That would consist of closing the door that is already there.
So you're just gonna close the garage door, and that's gonna be part of this records thing. And then you're telling me that there has to be control devices in there, right? For these records. I know we got into that once before, for humidity and stuff of that sort.
Yes.
And then you were telling me that you're not gonna put a ceiling in, you use the sprinkler system.
The sprinklers that are in that area, the heads turn up, and if you lower the ceiling, you've got to lower the sprinklers where the heads
I can
will go
understand
down.
that. I don't know. I'm just having a problem with this. I think we're getting into more money than what we really are put forth to us and everything. I think we're getting the cart before the horse. That's the way I look at it. So that's my problem with this $5,000. I'll hush.
Jackie, you mentioned a couple of times the County Public Records Commission. Who is that? I've never heard of it.
That's it's mandated by state law. It's appointed by 3 members are appointed by the mayor and approved by this legislative body.
Who
There's
you appointed,
one,
Mayor? Who did you?
Ron French, Bill Brewer, Roy Crawford, Phyllis Crisp, and then Betty Best is the county genealogist. She's here. And I'm on it as the county archivist, and then we have a county historian, Lorraine Smith.
Well, the reason I ask, it seems to me like it would behoove us that our information technology department be represented on the Public Records Committee. I mean, we're missing the boat, in my opinion. I agree with Mike, I agree with Ken. You know, and I'm in the technology business. We keep dumping money, as Mike said, in buying a bigger truck when maybe we can consolidate it somehow. And I think and I don't say this to you since it's the mayor's appointment, we're missing the boat by not having info tech on this Public Records Committee. If we have to, is it our prerogative to increase the size of it to get info tech on there? Or do we ask somebody to step off and let us get somebody on there?
Jackie, how is that commission set up? Is that set up by the?
It's set up by law, Tennessee Code. I mean, they state as court of record, then the county clerk and the register of deeds or their representative is mandated to be on the committee. And then the judge and then the, seems like the historian is ex officio. But we have invited John Herron. He has come to our meetings in the past, and I used to let him know every time that we had a meeting. And I work closely with John with the digital records program that we've got in place. We've got Laserfish software, and he backs it up on a server at the Justice Center. And but I don't think that it would be. I think it would be acceptable for an IT member to be on our committee.
Jackie, is that Tennessee Code annotated that sets that committee? Where you said the
Yes.
state law sets that?
It's 10-7-401. I think I included it in your packet.
I think what I would like to see is a group of, maybe it's a subgroup of the public records and IT come together and make a recommendation along the lines of what Commissioner Lewis is talking about, to this body about how we proceed with storing the records that have to be stored. And it might not necessarily include taking it all to digital, but certainly some of it could be taken digital.
Yeah, Jackie, I would rather see grant money like this spent on, even if we were going to spend it on a consultant, I'd rather spend it on a consultant that could come in here and figure out a way for us to be better electronically, and say, these are the records you you currently have that you can get rid of. Here's how you back them up. Here's the process. Here's the cost. Rather than just keep trying to put a Band-Aid on a problem that isn't going to do anything but get bigger.
I think you've done a wonderful job of what you've done, what you've had to work with.
And I agree.
But I think we need to take the next step.
The Tennessee code says minimum, it doesn't say maximum on that, so we can put more people on that committee, and that may be something we look at. Jackie, how much space do you have at, is it 8,000 square feet at?
At the operations center.
No, where you're at now.
I've got 4,000 square feet at Hubbard. I've got records in the hall, and I got to the point where I was covering up the fire alarm lights, and I had to quit putting records in the hall. But I've also got records that in the gym basement at Everett, and there's no heat, no air, very little lighting. I have to take flashlights when I go to retrieve records because I can't see what I'm looking for.
How much space do you have? What's the possibilities you have at the operations center? How many square feet?
The area that I've asked for is one area that's that would be, you know, a rectangle. And it's about 59 by 125 or 26. It comes out to about 7,000, maybe. It's either 7,434 or 234.
If you've got 4,000 that you're full, and you've got probably the basement of Everett full, is that really going to be enough space, or are you not going to be almost packed as soon as you get in there?
I think that I'll be able to, when I get the records in one place, be more effective at, you know, going through and being able to maybe see what I've got and group them in. Some of the records in the boxes at Everett aren't labeled good, and it takes pulling them off the shelf to, you know, go through them. And I do go through records about at least once a year, and usually more than that, twice a year, depending on the weather. If I'm going to Everett, you know, I mean, in the cold winter, it gets kind of cold out there.
Which would be another reason for me to get them electronically, so you're not having to run back and forth.
Yeah.
You're not having to worry about climate control. You're not having to worry about, you know, AC units. Is this grant, Jackie, specific in the use?
Yes.
Is it, so if you don't use it for AC, you don't get it?
I felt like that was the most important part of me getting to move to the operations center, because we've not had very good climate control over the records, and where I'm at, it's manually controlled. I've got 4 window units that are both heat and air, and I've been monitoring my place and the operations center with the electronic temperature and humidity, and I've got graph printouts of both locations, and that area over there is on a slab concrete floor. Where I'm at, it's on a block foundation. And, you know, that's not recommended for record storage due to the weight of the shelves. Once you get the shelves stacked, then you've got probably about 300 pounds per square foot. And they recommend a concrete floor, you know.
But when this grant is written up for consultant fees. Can you, I mean, as long as you're using it for consultant fees, can you spend it however you wish?
No, I don't think so. I would have to go back to the Tennessee Historical Records Advisory Board to, be able to get approval for spending it in any other way
Then,
than the engineering fees for the design of the HVAC system.
so it was a specific purpose grant?
Yes. It was a small amount, and I felt like that money could be used better in that area, because I felt like I needed to make sure I was getting the right system if I was going to, install one. I wanted energy efficient, and I also wanted one that was recommended for record storage.
So this, you're just asking to apply for this?
No, I've already got it.
Oh.
It's already been
What we talking about then?
approved.
We've already got it. We're not.
Well, my question is, do we have a choice about how we spend it?
Do you have to spend it right away or what?
I've got until June. It's got to be spent and documented by the end of June.
I thought that read like you had it.
Pardon me?
I was thinking it was reading like we're transferring money.
No.
We've already got
It would be appropriating money that was funded by the grant.
Well,
Have
maybe.
you seen the grant, Randy?
Randy, have you seen the grant?
Have you seen the grant? What is?
Yes.
What-
What's before you is to amend the budget to receive the money.
Yeah.
And authorize her to spend it.
We've got to approve this. What I'm asking
That's
is.
correct.
What I'm asking is, have you seen what it can and cannot be used for?
No, I wasn't part of the
Okay.
application.
I move we
itself.
approve this. We don't have a choice. We've got to put it somewhere. Yeah.
Or
We've
lose it.
already got the motion on the floor in the second, so we're up now for the vote.
Oh, it's already. okay.
Yeah, we've already,
That's right.
we had the motion in the second,
All right.
correct, before we had the discussion.
Okay, let me get this straight now, since you come in there, Mr. Randy. This is only to get the grant.
No. Jackie applied for the
So we've already
grant,
got the grant.
and this now is acknowledgement that we've been awarded the grant, and we brought to you a budget amendment asking you to amend the budget by this $5,000 so that she may go out and spend it for the purposes she's been describing.
Gotcha, okay.
The only constraint that I've heard here tonight is to satisfy the grant, she has to have the work performed and documented by June 30. So the only question, it sounds like to me, is if you have reservations about this, does delaying it 30 days to get an answer to your question jeopardize that June 30 deadline? And I can't answer that, Jackie. I don't know.
Well, and the other question is, if we go spend money for an architect and engineering fees on something that we may not plan to do, because if you came back, if we go spend this money and we come back and say, here's what an HVAC system is going to cost us, I've got the same argument. I don't want to do a new HVAC system. I want to find a way to avoid having to do that. Or at
Well-
least to do it in the mass that we're talking about having to do it in. I don't see any reason we can't go from 7,000 or 10,000 square feet to half of that if we electronically be able to store the rest of those documents. So if we go spend this fee to figure out that it's going to cost us $10,000 to $20,000 or $30,000 for an HVAC system to store records, I'm not for that either, because there's a better way to do it. I'd rather spend the money figuring out the better way to do it so that we don't have to go do this, or that we can do it on a much smaller scale.
I understand what you're saying. The money, I applied for another grant that would pay to implement install the HVAC system. And at this time, I've not had any plans to ask the county for money, additional money, because I know we don't have a lot of money.
Well, and it's not important to me who pays for
Yeah.
it, whether it's from the
Okay.
state or from the county. There's a better way to do it. I'd rather forget that grant and go back and reapply for a technology grant that helps us get better at record retention and storage in a way to fix it permanently instead of a way to put a Band-Aid on it.
Jackie, if we delayed this transfer, or this appropriation by 60 days, would that affect getting this done if we eventually do it?
Well, I don't think it would, as long as the architect and the engineering company can fit us in the schedule, you know. I won't even go there because I might not write any more grants. I was looking at trying to get funding through another source if this other one didn't come through. But the deadline on that one is March. And I thought if we got the design, then I would have more information, you know, to be able to apply for more funding through an energy efficient program.
Well, and I'm all for applying for grants, but but more for things that will help us, you know, get better. And that's my only point, is there's a better way to do this than to find more room. You know, we need to find a way to use less room, and I can't help but think that we can do that through technology.
In light of what you suggested, Mr. Lewis, wouldn't it, if the feeling is we delay the acceptance of this grant, which is specific to the design of the HVAC system, and refer this and ask that the Commission on Records have a meeting and define the very issue that you described, which is a plan to go forward with the idea that we're going to figure out a way to make most efficient use of the space and the technology that is available, and then come back to us in 30 days. It might be that the commission that the mayor has appointed would come back and say, we like the way Jackie's plan is going, we'd like to recommend that to you to go forward with it. Because as I recall back over the previous meetings we've had here, Jackie has stayed pretty consistent with her plan, and that step one leads to step two. You have to get this part of the information together before you get to the next part of the information, all of which were contingent upon getting grants that did not cost the county money, but was the monies of each step was being funded by the grants that she achieved as she built her program together. And you know, I think that's where we're kind of going in a circle here around this thing. One thing, you need additional information to go to the next step, which is the additional monies that it's going to take to make it happen. Whether this room is going to be electronically driven, whether it's going to be paper and electronic, whether it's going to be whatever, each step has to be completed because the grantors, if that's a proper way to say it, want all that information prior to it. And I think that was Jackie's intent, was to gather the information. The first thing was, okay, we do have a space, should we get to that point. We do have a plan to build what we need to build, should we get to that point. We now have to look at how we're going to take care of the environment of that area, should we get to that point. And it's all built one step on the other. So I think that's where we're kind of losing track of what's going on here. And somewhere in between, I don't disagree with what you said, because that is a massive undertaking to keep the records. It is something that is even going to get more critical as we go along. However, I think that commission that exists already should step forward and say, this is our long-term plan. And that way they could support what you're doing and give us an idea about where we're gonna have to go and what contingencies will be needed to make that happen. It's obvious the problem is still gonna be there. The problem is maintaining and utilizing and being able to access the records. That's always gonna be there. Now, the format in which it happens, there needs to be some decisions made on, because right now we're going with old technology and old techniques because that's all we got. And we've got to go forward and explore. Might be a good thing for this committee to come together and to set the long-term plan.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to amend the motion to postpone the approval of this until the February budget meeting with a request to the Records Commission that they report back to the Budget Committee on whether or not they want to proceed with this plan, or if they want, or if, let's see, if, or what their plan is to better utilize technology in the record storage, or if they can come up with a plan.
I would second that with a comment, if I may, to get it on the floor. That would determine, as I said, that would determine the direction that we're going to go in, and I think it would relieve a lot of the confusion. And Jackie is working very hard to try to come up with a solution, and I think it would help her along that line.
And Jackie, again, I commend you for the work that you've done, and you're doing it exactly as you've been instructed to do. I think the discussion in this committee is to let's change direction, or let's certainly look at the possibility of change in direction in how we address the issue of storage. So in no way is this, any kind of a discussion that says, Jack, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
We just simply need to look at a new route in order to get it done, and this is probably a good first step to go do that.
Okay, now I have a question, and maybe y'all can explain to me how this is going to work, but she has actually followed the process by going to the allocations committee. They allocated her that space. We got turned down on a grant that was going to actually start the implementation. So, I mean, the commission approved this money right here for the consulting, and the commission approved it to be used exactly as the way it's being described by Jackie. Does this body have the right to say, no, we're not going to do that now? I mean, this has all been approved. She actually looked at a grant for, what was the grant you were turned down for, Jackie?
The implementation, It was the same grant that I've reapplied for.
How much was it, Jackie?
Well, this time I've asked for $99,900, and that is an estimate of using an architect and the engineering fees and the cost to renovate that area.
But had you got that grant, we would be in the process of building this thing over there right now. So, I mean, she's way ahead of where we're at on this board right here, on this committee, in the fact that the commission has approved for her to apply for this grant. She got the grant, and they approved for her to use the grant. So what is our place and our role to tell her, no, don't do it, don't use it yet, we're going to change things? I mean, do we have that?
If the grant was denied, that commission action is null and void.
Well, no, but that grant was denied, but this one wasn't.
So we're back to square one.
Yeah, but she got the grant.
She got this grant, and we're not saying no to this grant. We're just saying, come
asking
back
for
to
more
us,
information.
let's rethink this thing.
Yeah.
And maybe we can use this money in a better way if they would allow us to do it. If not, and maybe we still need this HVAC system out there, even if we go to the digital process, because there may be some of the records we still have to move out there.
But and then what we're doing is just making that recommendation and passing it to the commission to make that recommendation.
We're asking the Public Records Commission, whatever it is, to come back with a recommendation that we can use this money, that we still need this money because we still got to have these records, but we also want to do the digital retention on some of the records.
Yeah, we're not declining
We're not
using the
trying
money.
to
We're just asking
stop
for
anything.
additional information before we make a determination.
Okay.
I mean, that's the way I see it. Maybe I'm.
No, I
wrong.
agree. I wish we could have gave her some direction a long time ago, though, before she got to this point in this whole, but, you know, she's had all of this put before the allocations committee, and she's got, you know, told them what she's getting those grants for, and the commission has passed those, and
Well,
I
did
mean,
we ever sit down and say, which of these records can we digitally retain and which can we not?
No, I've asked the question before.
I think I've asked the question.
Well,
But-
I could give you a copy of this book.
Well-
I mean, I could give you an idea of what is permanent and what is non-permanent.
But Jackie, and I don't mean to argue with you, but the problem is, I can read that book and I can say, okay, this record could be digitally retained, this one cannot. But I have no idea how much that means to us. I don't know
Okay.
if these
How
records would
many?
fill up this room, or if we could put them in this much of this desk right here. Because I don't know how much of those
Well-
records there are.
And that, quite honestly, Jackie, that's what we need from you. I mean, we can all go read that manual on the budget committee, and we'll have 5 different opinions. And that's part of the reason I said I wouldn't mind taking that money and having a consultant who does know what that is, who is sure about what records can be kept electronically and what records can't. It seems to me that's a much better use of our money,
Which is
even if it's another grant that
which
we
is
have to
exactly
apply.
the
Yeah,
reason
the
to
issue
have
to
the
this-
IT person involved.
yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
Well-
I agree with you. I think that that committee or that commission should have, we do need to put IT on there, and there does need to be someone with an expertise in how to make these records take up less space needs to be involved in that. I just want to make sure that we're not, since this has been an approved
Yeah, we don't wanna
grant,
throw
we're
it
not
away.
doing anything with it that's
I
not
don't see
going
that we're doing anything.
Do you
That
see
was
any problem with
denied.
us doing this, Randy?
Yeah, we don't need to throw it. Well, and see, the problem with this $5,000 grant, it's specific to a HVAC consultant.
The matter that's before you is to amend the budget. So you're not turning this down.
No.
Nor are you approving it. So postponing it is effectively what you're doing.
Yeah.
Correct.
I don't
That's
see
all
an
I'm
issue.
trying to do is postpone it.
There's no time period that it has to be appropriated as far as the state goes.
As far as the state
That's
goes,
true.
it's here. We just hadn't plugged it in.
Okay.
Okay. And we,
But
I think the question is going to come down to the records committee and the state law, because there is still a law that says, you know, these have got to be copied to microfilm also. And I know that I've got probably approximately 6,000 linear feet of records and about 2,500 books. And the space that I'm looking at, you know, I've got bookcases that I have to measure to plan space for the bookcases and that kind of thing. But I'll be glad to provide you with anything I can as far as information goes.
Well, if you go to the committee, and, I mean, you know what we're looking for, and the information that we'd love to have, to be able to make some kind of decision as far as how we proceed from this point on. And I don't know that we have to go get a consultant to do that. I don't know if the committee can do that. All I know is somebody needs to be doing it.
Well, the committee will need to vote on it, I believe, because they are mandated by state law to state what happens with these public records. So
Steve, is that something you think CTAS would be able to tell us?
They wrote the book.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it may be a very simple answer to a question that we're making much harder than it is. And I'll be happy to check with CTAS.
Okay.
Okay.
Any more
thank you.
discussion? Explain exactly what we're voting on now. Okay,
You have two things before.
all right. Okay,
With the caveat that the committee come report back to the budget committee that whether or not they can digitize some, what can be digitized, what cannot be.
Basically, they come with a recommendation of the next step.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at. That was
Public Records Commission recommend the next step as to what can be digitized or what has to be maintained as a
Possibilities of
hard
electronic.
copy document.
we ready for a vote? Pat, will you?
Are you all ready? The amendment, okay, voting on the amendment. Lael,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Melton. Mitchell.
Yes.
Samples. Motion passed.
Now, do we need to vote on the amended motion? Okay.
Just, could we review the original motion that was made so that we are a little clearer on what that,
Can you give us,
because the amendment sort of counteracts what the original motion is. The original motion was only to put it on the floor. Yeah.
yeah, okay, all right.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So do we need to, anything else we need to do with that?
Mr. Blount said his motion was, I move that we put it on the floor for discussion.
Okay,
Make a motion, put it on the floor.
okay.
Put it on the floor, and the motion is for approval. Then you put it on the floor for approval. So you got a motion for approval and a second. You basically voted the main motion down. And then you made an amendment to the motion, which was postponed.
Probably should have been a substitute motion rather than an amendment.
Yeah.
But if you're right, effectively, you killed it.
No, we amended all the amendments did was move the approval to February. Just postpone it.
Okay. It's done. Item F1D, highway maintenance of equipment. This is a housekeeping transfer per the auditor. Randy, do you want to explain that, or do you want Bill to come up?
I can do it or you can, Bill. The next two items are merely putting the retiree insurance in the account where it was from where the original retirees were paid from. All you're doing is moving it from one line item to another line item. That's correct.
We originally had that,
Any discussion? That's,
we
go ahead.
originally had it in that line item and then transferred it out, Randy, or what, how did we get here?
We paid it out of the wrong account. It should have been paid out of the account where the payroll was incurred.
So it's just an accounting, it's just an accounting entry.
That's correct.
Any more discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Lael. Lewis. Melton. Mitchell.
Yes.
Samples. Motion passed.
Okay, F1E, same situation there on $62,372. Do I have a motion? Second? Any second? Any discussion? Ask for a roll call vote.
Lael? Lewis? Melton? Mitchell?
Yes.
Samples? Motion passed.
F1F, general capital projects, $57,306.76 for the Townsend Covered Bridge project. Randy, will you present that?
I included a synopsis in here. You've got two budget amendments to consider, and I probably could have done it in one, but hopefully by splitting it up, it makes it a little easier to understand. I included a memo in here that describes the financing pieces. The total project cost is $286,534, of which $229,277 is a state grant that funds 80% of that. The 20% is to be matched with local dollars, totaling $57,307. To fund the local match, you have before you a suggestion that the contingency line in the Capital Projects Fund 189, there is $39,519.29 that is not allocated for a specific project. It is identified as contingency by County Commission. And we're proposing to use that plus transferring $17,787.47 from the Development Department to Fund 189. And the sum of those two appropriations, if you were to approve this, would fund the 20% match to cover the county's 20% grant match. Now, the numbers, if you looked at the numbers yesterday, they have changed. And the reason they have changed is, as I mentioned earlier, we got the auditor's adjustments. We thought we had $44,000 in that contingency account, and we were only transferring $13,000 from the general fund. And there was a $4,700 adjusting entry that the auditors made that applied back to 2011 this year. And we got those after we'd already booked or put the original transfer together for you.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
This covered bridge project has been on and off the books for several years.
1996 was the last time County Commission considered it, according to my research, but there was no money appropriated to cover the full cost at that time, from what I can find.
Right. The concept, though, has always been an 80-20 split. Is that correct? It's not, that has not changed. Even back in the early discussions in 1996, that was the concept of the grant application, was for an 80-20 from the state. Has there been any change relative that we could measure in terms of the amount of the cost of the project? Has that been adjusted from 96 to now?
That has been done. The project cost at the time, from the research I've found in the files, was estimated to be $200,000 back then.
So we've gained.
And there was some money. There was some money spent to do some design work. All of those plans, as I understand it, have been reviewed, updated with up-to-date cost estimates on the project.
Okay.
And Superintendent Dunlap's been involved in that, along with the mayor and other folks.
Now this covered bridge is going to be located on or near the site of the current bridge that crosses Little River there.
It will be that
It will
bridge.
become that. That's what I was thinking. And as such, that would keep us from ever having to go head-to-head with TDEC or anything in the future about possible access across the river there. Will it be a pedestrian, bicycle, or motorist bridge?
pedestrian and bicycle.
Okay, and it will come off of the old River Road and connect us with 321 there.
Yes.
Okay.
Just, the bridge stays just where it's at. That is, the county does own that bridge, and the longer it sits there without any of these updates to it, the more it deteriorates, to the point that if it becomes, the situation comes that we have to tear that bridge down, the cost, just from looking at what TDEC wanted just to remove some stones out of that river, I can imagine how much it would cost us to get permitting to tear that bridge down over that river.
Okay. Mr. Dunlap, can I ask you a question regarding this? Your estimation of the condition of the structure of the bridge as it stands today?
The bridge was built in 1915 roughly, so when it was used for motor vehicle traffic, it was rated poor. Does not mean it's rated all right for what Randy's talking about, Ed's talking about, bicycles, pedestrians. And that was the plan on the front end whenever this grant was first applied for and given to the county. This will be the start of the bike trail going into Townsend.
Okay. Now, you were in office in '96 when all this was being discussed for the first time, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And as what you alluded to is the plan was as a natural beginning spot on that bike trail and tourist type addition.
Pretty much, yes. This was to showcase per se the entrance of the valley in Townsend.
Okay.
That's what Governor Sunquist saw whenever he done the grant. That's what Bill Chris saw when he applied for the grant. Took so long, the new structure had to be built before anything could happen. This old structure, a lot of politics come into play. It took it a pretty good long time. Governor Bredesen pulled the grant through Commissioner Nicely about 2 years before his ending term. So that's how come we're back up here now to reapply for the grant again. So.
Okay, is it, in your estimation, is it a worthy project for this county to, because of the tourism, et cetera,
To me it is.
accessibility?
To me it is, Holden. Yes, it is. And then, you know, the folks in Townsend, I mean, I see it myself living down here in the flatlands. I've had several conversations. Ed just come in on board for it here just a couple of years ago, you know, when he found out we're going to do it again. Ed likes the thoughts of it. You know, everybody I've talked to, it's going to be a worthwhile project for the county.
Okay,
Plus, and I'll allude just a little bit what Ed said on the destruction of the old bridge. I mean, this is cheap compared to what it cost. You're looking $300,000 to $500,000 to get that thing down. So.
Oh yeah, that's for one thing. I will, personal point is I remember in my youth, that was our access to Dry Valley when I went to visit my grandparents.
Yes, it was.
Crossing that bridge.
Probably
and
state
as such,
maintained.
it has a certain sentimental.
Could have been state maintained at that time too. That used to be the state route going to Townsend Hole. So.
Right, and that's, according to my age now, that's been a
I
while.
wasn't going to say that. I was not
It's been
about
a
to say
while.
that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dunlap.
Randy, would you explain the difference between general fund and the contingency fund balance?
The county has a capital project fund 189. Best I can tell, there are some, it contains fund balances in there and you have appropriated money out of that in recent months for, I think, the library project, the HVAC system at the library was one that's been appropriated out of that. But there is a specific line in there for contingency, and it's under the control of county commission, which makes sense since you all are the appropriating body. It is a remnant of former bond funds that, best I can tell, that were unspent. So it's legitimately capital project funds that the county has left over from prior sources of bond proceeds, some of which has been appropriated previously, and then this amount is unobligated and available for contingency. I'm bringing it in the form of a recommendation. That's one way to come up with part of the match.
How much is in that fund?
You've got your fund balance report in here in the packet. We ended June with, we start the fiscal year with 605,000, and we've made we've made 4 appropriations this year. Turn that around, Joe. We've appropriated $225,000 for the wall and roof. We've restored $7,650 from a previously appropriated project, so we increased the balance there. We've appropriated $150,000 for William Blount High School HVAC project, and then last month, $25,000 for bleacher seating at Heritage High School.
So
I misspoke on the library one. I'm sorry for that.
So the 225 was for the library?
Wall and
No, for
roof.
wall and
That
roof.
was so all these were for the school?
Here you go.
Wall and roof is, the $7,600 was money that was unspent from the William Blount High School sewer repair project. I'm sorry, I'm reading out the wrong fund for you. That's the school's capital fund.
Yeah, it is. I would just follow his numbers.
Yeah, but all that's in that fund, right? I'm sorry, the 605 is that in Fund 189? 605 was allocated all for schools. So the 39,000 that I am suggesting is not obligated for anything. It's in contingency.
Okay. 605 is,
Allocated all for schools. And from that, you've appropriated money this year for the wall and roof, the William Blount HVAC project, and the bleacher seating at Heritage. And you have about 212,000 remaining on the school's allocation.
so but is the contingency fund balance all for the school?
No, 44,000 before this audit adjustment was under the line item for contingency to be designated by the county commission.
That was general fund.
It was unobligated monies in that Fund 189, not the general fund, Fund 189. It was unobligated, unassigned, uncommitted.
These monies all came from excess of the projects for building the schools, Prospect and Union Grove and so forth. Is that correct, sir?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The monies that was appropriated to the schools came off of the projects such as Prospect School, Union Grove, et cetera. Those were
I assume, I don't know the
because
origin of which ones.
The latest capital projects we did through school were those particular items. So there was some overages, and that's where that 124, 125, 6, and 7, that's where those monies came from, was the
That
overage.
contingency fund's been in there for quite some time.
Yes.
Best I can tell, yes. So that's a suggested way, if we're to proceed with this grant application, and I think that's important given the conversation we've just had. This is to apply for the grant, and in fairness to you and the full commission, we wanted to identify the sources of funding ahead of time. If you wanted to consider it, you would know what the funding was. And if you approve what's been presented to you tonight, literally those monies will get transferred and sit in 189 until we receive the grant award. If the grant award comes to Blount County, then we will come back with an appropriation. but we wanted to put everything up front, fully disclosed. The only other thing I would suggest to you is between my office and Bill's office, we will be managing the grant. Bill will oversee the construction aspect of it, and we'll file the paperwork.
Is there a fairly good opportunity that this grant will be awarded?
That's
if
my
we
understanding.
match
I
this?
mean, is yes.
Okay. So, I mean, we're in essence setting the wheels in motion. Okay.
Okay. Do we want to do one, or F1F and F1G together, or do you want to do them separate?
We ought to do them together, I think.
Okay. Do I have a motion we accept F1F and F1G? Do I have a second?
Second.
Any more huh? Okay. All righty, any other discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Hold on, does that motion include that funding source? Does it?
Yeah.
Yeah. According to what we got here.
I mean, that should say that that's what.
The way we've structured the budget amendments for you is very clear. It does include that funding source, and it does include identifying that contingency amount now to be the project funding. It'll be no longer contingency.
Ask for a roll call vote.
Lael,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Melton, Mitchell,
Yes.
Samples. Motion passed.
There are no transfer items on this
May I
agenda.
ask a question, Mayor? As part of these amendments, we included a resolution that is identified as Resolution 12-12-002 for this project. It's not appropriating any money, but it lays it out a little cleaner for the rest of the commissioners to understand. Do you want that included, or do you want it all considered as part of the budget items that go to commission?
I think the resolution needs to go along with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. Thank you.
All right, item G, financial report. This is information only. Next, I'll ask for any input on items not on the agenda. Yes, Linda.
I'm Linda King, and I just want to comment on this discussion you just had about a covered bridge. The debt that this county is in, I don't think we should be considering spending money that we have in a contingency fund. There's a lot of important things that would help our whole community. We have roads like Morganton Road, where we just had a young man, 18 years old, killed there. We have dangerous conditions on some of our roads. And we're going to need work done where we need a contingency fund to use. You're talking about this being good for tourists, bicyclists, and pedestrians. Why not worry about things that are good for the county as a whole, not one little bitty section? And again, when we're talking about a bike trail, we're talking about these greenways, we're talking about Plan ET, and we're talking about Agenda 21. And I think that any money that we have sitting in account at this point needs to be spent on something that's going to help our community as a whole and also get our debt paid off, not spending more. We don't have money to be spending on little pet projects. Thank you.
Any other items not on the agenda?
Mayor, I have three, please. I wanted to report three items for you just by way of information. First off, the mayor and I participated in the audit exit conference with the auditors, and we should get notice from them probably within the next 2 weeks as to whether the audit has been approved. And when we get that notice, it will be posted to our website and available for the full commission and the public to see the results of the fiscal year, but we can't release that stuff until they've approved it in Nashville. I can tell you we did receive an unqualified audit opinion. Second item is there's been a good bit of discussion on a piece of legislation that's likely to be introduced this legislative session in January. It is a piece of legislation that the State Comptroller's Office has written and authored, and I posted it today on the county's website, and I've put a memo in front of it because if you just put the draft legislation out there, there's no context. So the average person who might want to pull up our website and learn about it has no point of reference. So I just put a brief memo in front of it to just describe what it is and took no opinion on it one way or the other. I would expect that legislation to probably get modified in the next couple of weeks, and it will probably change and be introduced then in January. Once we get the final draft of it, I'll post it on our website, and it's on the front page of our website. You don't have to go under the budget or under the accounting office to find it. It's there, easy to find. The third thing is we've spent the majority of our time tonight discussing grants in various stages of their evolution. My staff has authored a grant process and procedures and to try to get a handle on all of our grants so that we can provide concise information to you in an organized manner. And we will start, the drafts are already complete. We're going to be meeting with department heads and elected officials over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Once we vet the process and get input from them, we will bring a recommendation back to this body for your consideration.
Any questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Adjourn.